sentence kaku shada tini nyembu yomare. Some level some hopkal kaku complexity to stability nyemche shoot to this is the secret of if language effectiveness. All right. So how does that happen? This means that you should know how to write easy sentences and difficult sentences. Sentence these ring at the cognition and learn how we teach. All right. So this lesson is going to be on that. Okay. So we're going to call this lesson sentence structures. Sentence ki tomshi tamada yungware. Easy structures, difficult structures. All right. Okay. And in this lesson, we are going to focus, before we learn any sentence structures, we are first going to look at, the unit of a sentence. Sentence nalolia, any sentence the tanda the gotsuelia, any tumutandu kwane tik rere tumutang mare. Tik group, sentence, the word group, tux yeva chigrimato, tik rere le tanda yomare. So when you divide a sentence into word groups, you get different word groups. Some of these word groups are called phrases. Some of these are called clauses. Clause, the phrase, the shingu, we are a sentence. So a sentence is a combination of phrases and clauses. Sentence, the phrase, the clause, ni tete na lusha yarwa. So phrase kari me clause kari me dikengu war. These are all word groups of words. Okay, so we need to understand this first. And the sentence kagi phrase kagi clause sentence yorba tidu how do you understand? All right, so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at phrases and clauses first, so that you understand different levels of sentence structure. Easy sentences and difficult sentences. All right. Okay. Now, why is it important to understand phrases and clauses? This is TikTok. Clause, phrases, TikTok. All right. So why is it so important to learn that? All right. Now, why is it important? It's because, phrases and clauses are the most important structural units of a language. The unit of a sentence is not a word. Sentence, phrase the clause and sentence sentence phrase the clause phrase the clause the sticks love the phrase the clause did on the shine sentence. This is the reason why you have to understand phrases and clauses. Translation translate to phrase the clause motion translation the clause translate translation the kawshtare. All right, so sentence na clause na phrase the because that is where the meaning is. The meaning is not in the words. The meaning is in phrases and clauses. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, the swadi ondita sik yangbalia tanda yomare. All right, in phrases the clauses chibrachina tanda phrase chila tanda chiyore clause chila tanda chile gore. This hama to jari when they connect sik to chichadi and tanda tax code joramato sik yangba chilia tanda chatam yomare. Okay, so it's important to know what phrases mean and what clauses mean. Now, it also helps you. Now, once you understand phrases and clauses and how you use them in sentences, all right, then you will be able to write easily and write good sentences and write meaningful sentences without making, big mistakes. All right. So phrase the clause phrase the clause who jardan the shimbrichina lel hayore. Sik jardan janakanya your constant sentence chick now see mango shoes you do one tick karikar jaw you made the condis jaw you made the mount have mount it doesn't even really make sense. Jari confusion. So this is the reason why it's important. It's good for your own understanding of English language, and it is good for your own reading, writing, and speaking of language. All right, it helps you. So this is the importance of learning phrases and clauses. All right, so now let's look at a sentence. All right, so when you're writing, you write in sentences. Okay, so if you look at any English sentence, you will see you have to say it is not a combination of words, but it is a combination of phrases and clauses, because the meaning is in phrases and clauses, not in words. Just a sentence chi tonda koyelia, phrase the clause su duche tonda koyer, phrase the te, clause the te, and the tuna tonda lamsa kobre. Okay, so let's see. Let's look at this sentence. All right, so you can see I have a sentence down there. I will eat bananas and drink juice. All right, so if you look at the first one there, I will eat bananas. All right, this has, this part of the sentence is called a clause. And then the two words written in red, that's a phrase. All right, so I will eat bananas. If you look at I, you will see that this has a subject and a verb. All right, it has a subject and a verb. Okay, but if you look at the phrase, it does not have a subject and a verb. It may have a subject, but it will not have a verb, or it may have a verb, but not a subject. You can't have both in a phrase. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you understand? Clause,
Yes.
verb, phrase nalia yana subject yore, the man verb yore, nija yomare phrase na. But if you look at these two separately, they make sense. Drink juice, nana lamsa ha kogdwa. Juice tung balagu yarwa. They tonda chik tagaran tensaswa. I will eat bananas labdu kwane lamsa ha kogdwa. Banana sagins. Any juice tungi is lebre. All right, so juice tungi is here the phrase re. Dinalia subject verb nija tayo mare noun chitante yore. Or a verb re, the verb phrase drink juice the kon chazich lete yor mado subject the sigdo na yomare. Gan delia sigdo tunzu na lo subject verb nija yor. So subject the verb nija yor sigdo the clause re ya subject kyangba yana verb kyangba yana phrase re. Okay? Did you understand? Phrase
Yes.
and clause. So I'll give you more examples. Example in the yoga. All right. So phrase. Now let's look at a phrase first. Clause martata. Phrase detail in that. Now a phrase is a group of words. It's a word group. Word to race. Word to ruru search race. It has a verb or a subject, but not both. Nija yomata. Verb chiyore, subject chiyore. All right, in a nyamdo ling man, nyamdo lene and clause chature, nija lene clause chature. All right, so here are some examples. For example, drink juice. All right, it only has the verb there. Okay, so it's called a verb phrase because there are two words there. It's called a verb phrase and it begins with a verb there. Eat bananas. All right, it's a verb phrase. It's a phrase because it does not have a subject. Subject mindu adinalia. Do you understand? Let's look at number 3. Play football. There's no subject. Play football. It's called a verb phrase. That's the phrase. In the same way, my little brother, in a phrase. All right? Okay. Our English teacher, the phrase re, in a phrase kane noun phrase re. All right. In the morning, shoge las in the morning. The phrase re, lamsa ha kugwa in the morning so shoge las yarba. All right. Tanda chaza morning chigo logminda in the morning kadin konsunyam do rote yarba shoge las yarba. Now, because it begins with a preposition ins, then go to in, on, for, with, some engine and prepositions. Preposition, it's called a prepositional phrase. All right? When the where the preposition phrase. For breakfast, preposition phrase. For on the table. table kanla city on the go to the it is a prepositional phrase. All right. So kawaii me, kaduche me, see there's some preposition phrase not to very carefully. All right, condition che the adverb not good work because it's adverb jaima very carefully. He did his work very carefully. So very carefully to the subserve channel of the tanda. Okay, so it's an adverbial phrase because we are using an adverb there. Very the carefully needs adverb. Quite easily, similarly, all right, quite easily is also an adverbial phrase. To understand better, that's also adverbial phrase. To end discrimination, okay, that's also an adverbial phrase. That is a phrase and it's an adverbial phrase. So these are examples of different kinds of phrases in Jinalia. Do you see? Kashina verb mare subject yomare. Kashina subject yore verb yomare. Okay, so dinzuli a phrase yore. Quran sikto chamalo tanda yor. Chatanyam the do namsa tanda kogre. Drink juice tanda kogre. Eat bananas Quran tanda yore. Play football tanda yore. My little brother Quran chaza nyamdo rusu tanda chatsam tanda kogre. Our English teacher le tanda yore. In the morning situkone tanda sev yore for breakfast. Okay, so all of these have some meaning there. Okay, but they are either verbs or they are subjects, but you will see that you don't see a verb and a subject, both in one of the phrase. So that's why it's called a phrase. Understood?
Yes.
Yes.
Phrase, the engine on Pemo. Yes, do you have a question?
The word the go on the proposition
That's good. That's good. For example, drink verb phrase. Or drink, eat, play. My little brother noun phrase. Okay, in the morning, in the preposition, in the prepositional phrase. Okay. All right. The phrase like that. All right. So I hope you now understand what phrase means. And in every sentence, you will see these sentences. So what is really interesting over here is when you are trying to understand a sentence, don't look at individual words. Look at the phrase. Do you understand? Phrase tanda talks koyungure tanda khasheshmado taunare sig rare tanda en sig mangu yobetu sentence into nalari ani tuye yore. So always look at phrases there or clauses. All right, so this is all about phrases. Okay, so what's a phrase? Can you tell me what a phrase is? Phrase correct.
Phrase is a group of words which have verb or subject,
but not
but.
Nijara yomare tinalia. Yana verb to, yana subject to, okay. All right, so now let's look at the clause. A clause is also a group of words, but it has both a subject and a verb. Subject and verb. All right, so look at the example there. I play football. All right, so I is the subject, play is the verb. Okay, so it's a clause. All right. My mother cooks momos. My mother is the subject, cooks is. It looks like a sentence. Doesn't it look like a sentence?
Yes.
Yeah, but then you have to be careful. Some of these are not sentences. I will show you at the end there. All right. So we study hard. It has a subject. It has a verb. The one we is a subject. Study is the verb. Okay. The birds fly high. The birds is a subject. Fly is the verb. If it rains today, it is the subject, rains is the verb. Now, if you look at the first, second, third, fourth clauses, they all are the same as sentences. But if you look at the last one, it says, if it rains today, it is a clause, but it's not a sentence. It's a fragment. If it rains today, subject verb. Clause here, the clause there, because the subject here, the verb here. Just a subject, the verb here, but some sentence in all right? So kasha sentence, kasha sentence, but then still they have a subject and a verb. So that's what you mean by a clause. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, it must have a subject and a verb, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily a complete sentence, all right? For example, the last one is a very good example. If it rains today, it has a subject and a verb, but it's not a complete sentence. It's a clause. Yes, it's a clause. Clause re in a sentence mardi. Shema denzo sentence the chikijigare ko chasan. Okay, so do you see the difference between a phrase and a clause? Okay? Did you understand?
Okay, ma'am. Yes.
Yes,
Alright.
I understand.
Okay, so what's the difference between a phrase and a
madam.
clause? Yes, phrase the clause.
The clue has a subject and verb, must need to subject and verb, but the phrase doesn't need both. They cannot go
Yes,
with the
it can have
both.
one. It can have
Yeah.
one. But all these are, please remember, they are not single words. They are word groups.
Yeah.
Group. Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Group clause phrase secret. Okay. All right.
So
Okay.
I have a question that
Yeah.
I laughed. Is that clause?
Yes, it's a clause. I is a subject, laughed is a verb. It has both the features of a clause. All right. And it is a complete sentence also. Okay. It has I laughed. Wow. So subject chida, verb chi chasamach dinalaya. Because sentence is chasamach koyare. Okay. So all you have to do is see if it has see if the group of words have a subject and a verb. Subject, the verb nija dueta koyare. Okay. And thingicha you have written the clause na chati clause in brain. All right. So it can be short or it can be long, doesn't matter. Just look for the very important features, a subject and a verb. Then it becomes a clause. Okay?
Ma'am,
All right.
if we have two verbs that also can be clues.
If you have two verbs,
Yeah. For example, we study and play hard.
we study and play.
And play hard.
We study and play hard. We study and play
Very.
hard. All right.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would say we study. All right. In that group of words, I see a subject and a verb, and play hard. In that group of words, I don't see a subject. Okay. I only see a phrase there. So I wouldn't say, take all of this together and say this is a clause. I would just take the part which has a subject and a verb. But I can still make the second one a clause. We study and we play hard. Now you have two clauses joined.
Yeah.
So what we are saying is that in a sentence, it's a combination of phrase and clause, or combination of clauses. Sentence nalia phrase the clause su dugo yore, yana clause manguch su dugo yore cigar. All right? What's it there? That's what it is. Okay. So sentence nale tumbuchesh yavache sentence di ma chagor. All right. Clause direshas, phrase direshas. This would do sentence chapter say this year. Okay. So just learn how to break up the sentences into clauses and phrases. Okay. All right. Now we are going to see which of these are phrases and which of these are clauses. These are all sentences, all right? So the ones marked in red are clauses and the ones marked in blue are phrases, okay? He reads many books, that's a clause.
Yes.
In the library, that's a phrase.
Library, it's a phrase.
It's a prepositional phrase, all right? Okay? I like thukpa for dinner. I like thukpa, that's a clause. For dinner, it's a phrase, prepositional phrase. When the teacher entered, you will see the teacher entered. The teacher, the subject, they entered the verb. So that part of the sentence is a clause. The student stood up is also a clause. and wished her. Now, wished her on its own. If you look at wished and her together, it's not a clause, it's a phrase. Yeah, it's a verb phrase. It's a verb phrase, all right? Our Zoom English class finished after 1 hour, all right? Our Zoom English class finished is a clause. After 1 hour, that is a phrase. Before leaving the meeting, we must sign out. So before leaving the meeting, before leaving the meeting is a clause. We must sign out is also a clause. See this blue one is also a clause, all right? Before leaving, oh, no, sorry, this is a phrase. Can you tell me why this is a phrase? Before leaving the meeting, to the phrase,
because they have no subject.
There's no subject, yes, there's no subject, all right? So this is a phrase, all right? We must sign out, that is a clause. We will must, all right? That's a clause. The, before leaving the meeting is a phrase. Before we leave the meeting, we sign out. Now you can see before leaving the meeting, before we leave, now it becomes a clause because I put a we there, which is a subject, all right? And then leave is the verb. So this is a clause, and the second part is also a clause.
Yes.
Clause phrase the clause in sentence. Understood?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, now I have some work for you. Now, state whether the word group is a phrase or a clause. So you have a lot of word groups over here. You have to try. This is your exercise.
Okay. Throwing paper along the street.
Throwing peppers along the street.
Press.
Press.
First one is a
Press.
phrase.
Okay, so the first one is a phrase.
Press.
Press. Yes.
Phrase.
Yes, number 2.
While snowing.
Well, snow
is a clue.
covered the path.
While snow
Clause.
Covered the path.
So covered path.
Clause.
What is it?
Clause.
It's a
Phrase.
clause.
Phrase.
Yes. You see snow and you see covered there. Snow is subject. Covered
Yeah.
is verb. So it's a clause. Okay, then?
The broken clothes.
The phrase.
It's a phrase.
Yes, that's a phrase. And it's a prepositional phrase.
Possession.
Then?
No one live here. Also, it's a
Clause.
Clue.
The
Clause.
clause. No one lives
No
here.
one
No
is
one is the
subject.
subject. Lives
Yeah.
is the verb. It's a
Verbs.
clause. Then?
If the expense is too big.
If
Also close.
It's also a clause, which is the subject.
clause.
Subject cardinal. Expense, yes.
Expense.
Expense is the expenditure. So that is the subject. Okay, then?
Thousands people walk every day.
Thousands of people walk every
Is
day.
it also
Clause.
It's also a clause. All right, which is the subject?
Thousand of people.
Thousands of people.
people.
That is the subject. Okay,
Yeah.
and there's a verb also walk. So that's a clause. And then, next one.
Unless it's rain.
Clause.
Is a clause.
Yeah, it's a
Unless it rains, it's a clause. Why?
Clause.
It has a subject and a verb.
Yes,
Yes,
subject and
there's a
verb.
subject and a verb. Chawatang na mato sedre. Okay, then
No one cared about the
Okay.
party. Clause.
Clause.
Yes, it's a clause. All right, which is the subject?
No one.
No
No
one.
one.
No one.
No one is a subject. Okay, what about the next one?
care. After the class.
After the
Clause.
It's the
Clause.
Phrase.
clause.
Phrase.
Yes, it's a
Clause.
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 The clause is the subject. Finished is the verb.
Clause.
What about the next one?
Vacant.
Phrase.
Yeah, the phrase.
That's a phrase. Why?
Phrase.
The position of S.
No, I have subject.
There is no subject
No,
there.
no subject, but it's
All right,
word.
and it's a while baking the bread is an adverbial phrase. While it shows time. All right, so adverbial phrase. While say the preposition mare. All right, it's a time word. Okay, so it shows while, when, say, and today. Okay, what about the next one?
Leaving me behind. It's a clause.
What is it?
Leaving me. That's a clause.
Where is the subject?
Subject is me.
I think press.
No. Subject
Press.
subject in a good in a verb level. Okay. So it's a phrase. There's no subject. Who is leaving you? Who is leaving you? So can I use shall? So the team into so you shall. So this is a phrase.
Press.
What about the next one?
A few were
Clause.
left. Close.
Yes, a few were left. So the subject is a few.
A few.
Were is the verb.
This-
Okay. Next one.
Which one is to?
Which has stolen.
Which has
Stole.
or stolen.
Which was stolen. Close.
Close.
It's a clause which was stolen. No, it's not a clause.
Which
Where's the subject?
I think
Which
it's a phrase.
Which is not the subject. There's there you know
There's no
when you
subject.
use this
Stolen.
kind of phrase, you will see that before which there is a subject.
Yes.
The book which was stolen, like when the
Mm.
or which thing area means the ligre. The book this is an adverb, all right? Adverb which was stolen. So it means that there's no subject over here, so it is a phrase.
Phrase.
Then
Scolded by his teacher.
Phrase.
Close. It's a close.
Phrase.
Phrase.
yes, it's a phrase. Why is it a phrase?
It's
Somebody told
have-
by
Yes, so
Because
there
it
is
hasn't no teacher,
For the
no subject.
subject Mindu Delia. There is no subject here. All right. So
Yeah,
it is a
there is
phrase.
no subject.
Oh, subject manner, yana verb manner, the phrase re. Okay. Subject the verb nija yana clause re. Okay. So this is how you identify a phrase and a clause. All right. Phrase the clause here. Okay. So now here is again some more work for you. Write C if it is a clause and P if it is a phrase.
is a P. First one A is P.
The first one, A is B.
P.
Do you agree? Do you agree, the rest of you? Is A P? Is A a phrase? Is A a phrase?
Bad about it.
I think it's a C. C.
C. Close.
A the austa phrase re clause re.
Press.
Why is it a phrase?
Because they have no subject.
There's no subject there. It has a verb, but there's no subject. Verb to are feeling bad, so the verb ro atin ma samolo. So it's a phrase. B.
B is a clause.
Yes.
Clause.
B is a clause. B clause because
Yes.
you have a subject and a verb. It is the subject, went is the verb. Okay, all right. What about C?
Kill
It's a
all
phrase.
the
It's a phrase. All right. Kill
Phrase.
all the birds. Phrase.
phrase.
Okay.
Phrase.
D.
It was here.
Clause.
Close.
Clause.
Close.
All right. And then E.
Clause.
We made some people close.
Made some
Clause. Yes, clause. What about F?
Passing through the forest.
Phrase.
Phrase.
Passing through the forest.
There's no
Phrase.
subject, so it's a phrase. All right. G.
Phrase.
Yes, that's a phrase.
Phrase. It's phrase.
Phrase.
Through difficult times means during difficult times. Okay, then H.
A phrase.
Phrase. Now this is an adjective phrase because clever is adjective, intelligent is adjective. So it's called an adjective phrase. Then
The boy had
Clause.
Close. Close.
That's just close.
Yes. Next one. The next one.
There's little.
There is a little
Press.
There is little hope.
close.
Press, I think.
Phrase.
Okay, somebody is saying it's a phrase. Why do you think it's a phrase?
Because there's not a subject, I think.
There's a subject there, Inginalia. Some subject Ming Yomarwa, Ming is subject of there is it like Chepomena Inginal there is it. It is raining. It is raining, it's an empty subject. Sometimes you have to use words like there and it. They are used as subjects. Okay?
Right.
Sometimes you don't have a doer of an action. It is raining. Rain ko rang shingi yongu yodu kwane. Chaba tang chungis ke me tu kwane. And then to leyan chepo chap chik ke it Seattle into the there Seattle into the all right. So there is little hope. Reva shira mindu siwa there is little hope sidu kwane reva shira mindu siya. Okay. All right. Next.
Speeding his car through the street of Onion.
Close.
Press.
Who is speeding his car? The team in the mid speed chinge de subject mindu. So this is a phrase. Okay, what about L?
I'm going close.
I'm going the clause. Yes. What about M?
Can you
Close. Can you help me? Help us. Close.
It's a clause. It's a question. It's a question. You see the subject you, and then help there. Then N.
We were at close.
Yes. And then the next one.
Sanka and her mother.
Phrase.
Is a phrase.
And her mother. Phrase.
Phrase. Then the last one.
Also phrase.
Close.
Clause. Salma is my friend is a clause, right? So this will give you enough practice to differentiate between phrases and clauses. Okay, now we're going to look at clauses. Now, if you look at clauses, we know that a group of words which has a subject and a verb is a clause. All right. Now, in clauses, you will see there are actually two types. Clause namanda niyor. Okay, one is called an independent clause. A clause that stands on its own like a sentence. Sentence, such a clause is called an independent clause. A sentence is an independent clause. Now, so it makes complete sense on its own. Sentence na lol independent clause, sentence. All right, complete sense. Now, dependent clause, all right, this does not have sense on its own. It requires an independent clause to make complete sense. Independent clause. So such clauses are called dependent clauses. Both of them have a subject and a verb, but one makes complete sense on its own, and it can be written as a separate sentence. But the dependent clause can never be written as a sentence because the meaning, the complete meaning, depends upon another clause. That's how you have an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now here is an example. For example, I refused to go because I had homework to do. All right, now there are two parts. I refused to go, and then because I had homework to do. Both are clauses. Nija nanglolia subject the verb here. I refused to go, I and refused. Because I had homework to do, I and had. Nija nanglo subject the verb here. So they're both clauses. But then you see, I refused to go, says Jorwa. That can be written as a sentence on its own. It makes complete sense. I refused to go. All right. It can stand like a sentence on its own. It's independent. The meaning does not depend upon another clause, all right? So it can be written as a sentence on its own. I refuse to go. Not domes. Okay. Sentence. So this is why it's called an independent clause, and it looks like a sentence. It is a sentence on its own. Now, if you look at the second part, because I had homework to do, see that? Because I had homework to do, homework I refused to go because I had homework to do. Refused to go to all right? So such clauses in a sentence, they are called dependent clauses, all right? Because the meaning depends upon the independent clause. Independent clause sentence mare. It's called a fragment. Fragments you do sentence check it to your search. Check it, all right? So this second part, because I had homework to do, and a fragment or a sentence and the clause because it has a subject and a verb. But then what kind of a clause is it? It's a dependent clause. It's a dependent clause. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so now a lot of people get confused with this kind of a clause. They think that, oh, this is a sentence. So they what some people do is they write, because I had homework to do, and they put a full stop. Full stop, which is wrong. Why? Because Quran chipo chilia complete meaning koryo medu kon full stop japsa koryo mare. Full stop jamne tigyo mare. Ko full stop the kwali to the gandhi independent clause the su jartu and shide complete sentence give and full stops give kwara. Okay? All right. Now the karchini chavre, how did it become how did it become a dependent clause? Because you put the word because there. Because patenda, then it is an independent clause. Remove because patenda. You're left with I had homework to do. If you look at I had homework to do, that is a complete sentence. But the moment you put because, it becomes a dependent clause. It becomes incomplete. All right? So that's how you get dependent clauses. Dependent clause because here the whens, here the ifs, here the whiles, here the and it clause the dependent chaduare Koranchik poch degmare Koranchik pochilia detu mare inji minji shemba independent clause jaguar ni sentence chatsam children is lovely. Okay, do you understand?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So now we have some examples over here. All right. Is it a dependent or an independent clause? All right, let's see. I could get good grades if I study. Now let's break this up into two parts. Which part is a dependent clause? Which is the independent clause? Dinasida.
First part.
If I study is the dependent clause.
Grade is independent clause.
Yes. Then
if I study is dependent clause.
That's right. If I study, the complete marwa, the dependent clause, the dependent clause. So I could get good grades. That is independent. If I study, that's a dependent clause. Okay, what about number two? Which of these two is independent and which is dependent?
Okay.
After
I
I finish
I finished
I will get a job.
Dependent clause. Get a job.
I finish college is dependent clause, and I will get a job is independent clause.
That's right. After I finish college, okay, so it is a dependent clause. All right, the sentence okay, so I will get a job. That's a complete, it makes complete sense. Okay, it can be written separately as a separate sentence. So it is an independent clause. Okay, what about number three?
They are playing football as independent clause.
Which part of the sentence is a simple independent clause?
First part.
They were
Playing football.
They were playing
independent.
football.
Football
That is
is
independent.
clause.
Okay, then
Why?
he
Well,
was
studying is dependent clause.
Coach lobchon chishu ringalia konzu football zede. Yes la vedre.
Mm.
While he was studying lobchon chishu ringalas, lobchon chishu ringalia konzu football zede. So sigar. Okay. All right. What about number 4?
Just
He
basic.
said
He
would have
said
been
would have
Although he studied
the independent
He's basic. That
if he
Which
had
one is independent? Which is dependent?
his would have
is this
been better.
easy would have been
His
better said.
easy would have
It's
been
independent
Yeah.
that
clause.
is independent
That is
clause.
independent.
If
All
he
right.
had spent more time on it,
On it.
is
That is a dependent clause.
dependent clause.
If Korananga Glamsa dependent Swiss all right. Kesi ko tusu manga tang yuna ko ese dili yaga chayo is the one. Okay. All right. What about number 5?
although he studied
Although he studied hard is
Then
dependent clause.
dependent clause.
He felt is
He felt
independent.
Although he studied hard is dependent clause.
Dependent, yes.
He
And
failed
he failed is
is
independent.
independent clause.
He failed and for it makes complete sense. Independent rate. But although he studied hard, so although he studied hard, that is a dependent clause. It cannot stand on its own. Sentence all right? Dependent clause. Okay, so that is a little bit of practice on dependent or independent clause. Okay, now here, this is your job. Underline the independent clause and circle the dependent clause. Now just tell me which is independent and which is dependent.
You can do better is independent.
Okay.
When you are tried is dependent clause.
Okay. What about the next one?
The growth chair is independent clause.
Yes.
When Messi came
onto
onto the
Field.
Tell is-
Sorry, the spelling is
field.
wrong over here. Field and tanga. All right. The crowd cheered when Messi came onto the field. Messi field okay. So which is independent?
the growth chair is independent.
And which is dependent?
When Messi come into the field.
Yes, when Messi came onto the field. Yes. Okay, what about the next one?
You're right. With X.
They wrote with
They roared with excitement as he raced down to the goal. So which one? Which is the independent clause?
They roared with
They roared with excitement, and which is the dependent clause? As he raced down to the goal. As he raced down to the goal. That all of that is the dependent clause. Okay. What about the next one?
the weather is nice tomorrow.
If the weather
We
is
will go to
nice
not
tomorrow is dependent clause.
Dependent clause.
We will go to thereby is independent.
nice tomorrow is
Whether apostrophe s is if the weather is nice tomorrow,
nice tomorrow is
we will go.
dependent clause.
Yes, that's a dependent clause. We will
go to day park is independent clause. Como por exemplo, como eu que sou eu
Kejik
Kocho.
correct.
como por exemplo, como eu por exemplo.
Okay, all right. So if I thought that you were coming with me, which one is dependent, which is independent?
I thought that you were coming with me.
I thought it is independent
I-
clause.
And that
Yeah.
You are coming with me
With
is
me
is
is
a
dependent.
dependent.
clause.
That you were coming with me is dependent. Yes. What
Yeah.
about the next one?
Was
Well,
she?
is away
Way someone will.
and is a dependent clause. Someone will take her
Someone
place.
will take her
Dependent.
place.
It's a dependent, independent clause.
That's right. That's right. Okay. What about the next one? He took his
While she is away.
he took his umbrella, his redati.
This is he took
Look,
his
umbrella
umbrella, although
It took
was
his umbrella is independent clause,
independent.
although it wasn't
Although
raining.
wasn't
It's
raining.
dependent
as
clause.
Dependent
Yes.
clause.
While she
dependent.
is
Okay. What about the last one?
Well,
Well, the leaves are still
while leaves are on the
dependent clause.
trees. Mistake.
Let's take some pictures. It's independent clause.
While the leaves are still on the street is dependent clause. Please take some picture is independent clause.
All right. So that's how you identify a dependent clause and an independent clause. So what you have to remember over here is a dependent clause cannot be written as a sentence. You can't write it on as a sentence and then put a full stop. It would be wrong. It's a fragment. It's not a complete sentence. It's just a part of a sentence. If you want to, give or bring out its complete meaning, you must make sure that you add to this dependent clause an independent clause. Independent clause, when you are tired, full stop, no race. All right. When Messi came onto the fields, did you post your full stop, sentence and no race? Independent clause. Okay. So this is, the significance of differentiating between an independent clause and a dependent clause. Okay.
So, last
Yes.
one. Let's take some photo. Where's the subject? Last one there.
This one, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take some pictures. Let's take some pictures.
So which one is the subject?
This is a complete sentence, actually. Let us take some pictures.
So if we separate with the dependent.
No, let us, the subject, us. All right. Okay. Us is the subject, actually. But then this kind of a sentence is called an imperative sentence. Not an imperative sentence. Request the command that any sentence subject let us. Okay. All right. It's a complete sentence. You can write it as a complete sentence. Let us go. There is a subject. There is a subject, and people understand. Okay. So let us go to Kushal Nagar. Kushal Nagar do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. So team in dua let us in the English language. Okay. All right. So that itself is the subject there. All right. Just ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where are we now? Where does this go? Let this go. Yeah. Oh, now. I think we finished with phrases and clauses.
Clauses.
Phrase the clause ki yeba de chashe wa. The shirat mindo yine. Ye ka tangi cancel di tayo karsa the PDF files tayo. The nanlo a phrase the clause ki yeba chase exercise pe manguyar. The exercise sangaloma kushalob san dorjila tayo ba. So you have to just practice this. And then the culture race with this basic understanding. The thanya a simple sentence in a karsigore, compound sentence in a karsigore, complex sentence in a karsigore, kandis in chagdosie the and thanya the shen gotsugre. Okay. All right.
Nice.
So that I'm going to leave it over here. The Kanat and the Mongologi Devrichin and the All right. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, let me just show you. I'm going to stop sharing this. Share another one. Okay. Share. Yeah, it's in here. This one. Yeah. This is the book. And you have this book, and there are many exercises. They close the exercise. Okay, so you have lots and lots of exercises and practice material for you. Exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3. Phrases, the clauses, exercises, right? So get your copy from Kushalov Santorjila and practice a lot. They practice monks now. Okay. This one. Dima toba log men kan toba de sangi shala ma do yang sangi snchuma lesson sa which I can see to shagi shin test lib na ya mata na ya chosmedo. Okay, so I'm going to stop over here to that this chick that kama kashimat medo kama trudo. All right, so any questions? Any questions?
The independent close the merge while the because some of the world some senate some of the shadow world.
Condition again on condition.
The because the some world some the senate some word did some of the independent close change like that.
Again on the dogma the inji dodan the pege dodan dogma. Again on the tick to dodan for condition me haku me alunya. Okay.
And the engine alone because he is eating while we are studying. Does not while we are studying is the independent close channel. The independent child while so
while so independent China swing it be my didn't get sick under the wash out under any phrase can the can check to on the water yore. Independent child ya swing the karkari sugar islam na there 600 day. Can you see this? After although they how you get a dependent clause, not independent. Independent the moment you put these words and these phrases in front of a clause, it becomes independent. It becomes dependent. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see the box there?
Yes.
Oh, box din alolia sigmangushtua. These are the words or phrases that make a clause dependent. Right? After the jelas, the nyelias, the yunes, Kesi Chevrochinas, Kimzen de la Tenes, La Jorwa, then so clause chick don't get without any dependent chapter. Okay, the word example pe bangutedwa. After we finish the game, Nazu Temutes how do you use the dependent chanswa. Temutes how do you use them the jelia Chikuda, the men any Tunda Samaswa, Tunda Chatsamaswa. All right, and then although we finish the game, Temutes Hanes, right? As we finish the game, before we finish the game, said, if we finish the game, since we finish the game, said, that we finish the game, that we finish the game. When we finish the game, while we finish the game, oh, then to take the so we are, and then to dependence on its phrase and some did the box in all your tigre. And the Gabata, any clause the Quran comes and give your Marisi got inji independent, she came no mother tamba, inji sentence not right. Inji sentence the fragment to your. Okay. This is what they done the page to swat, did some PDF copies pure, on the phrase the clause the chaza. Or did download detail shoot anything else to go next lesson in Shabi. We will be going through these, and then eventually we will try to use these to make our own sentences, simple sentence, complex sentence down on the certain page. Okay? Yeah. Done? Any questions? Mangbuyo.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a question? Anybody has a question? No? Yube?
No.
Okay, so we come to the end of today's class, and then next week we will, do more on different types of sentences in the English language. Okay, and this will be useful to write correct sentences and write different sentences in the English language. The all right, and go inji lodune lamsang go to echi depend on close the phrase. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
So, thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, ma'am.
진하게.